This week's Torah reading is called Korach, which is the name of a cousin of Moshe and Aharon, who were brothers. Korach prepared a whole rebellion against his cousins, Moshe and Aharon, by saying, why do you raise above the rest of the people? God is inside of each one of them. The whole congregation are holy people. Everybody's holy. Why do you raise up? Why are you leaders, so to speak, on top of the whole congregation? Now, we have to understand a very simple fact. Korach himself, he belonged to the tribe of Levites. And these people were actually raised above the rest of the nation. And the truth is, above them, there were the Kohanim, the priests. But the Levim were also raised people, so to speak. Korach was part of that group of leaders. And he gathered, the Torah says, 250 people against Moshe and so on. And these were Nesiei Ha'edah, leaders of the congregation. So wait a second. They themselves were leaders. How can they come and say, why do you raise above everybody else? And furthermore, when Moshe Rabbeinu actually suffers this rebellion, Moshe Rabbeinu answers Korach and says, do you want to also be a Kohen, a priest? Is it not enough that God chose you to be a Levite? You also want to be a priest? So we see from here that Korach was not so much against leadership, against being a raised person above all other people. No. But there's something we have to understand. What was he actually searching for, looking for? He's not against leadership. He was a leader. Everybody else was leaders on the rebellion. And he wanted to be a Kohen and a priest. Why is he rebelling against Moshe and Aharon, saying, why do you raise up above everybody else? In order to understand this, we have to understand first, what does it mean to argue? What does it mean actually a rebellion? In Hebrew, we call it machloikes. Discussion, argument, just for the sake of argument. And the truth is that every single thing that exists in the world, every single idea that a human being comes up with, actually comes from God. What does that mean? There's nothing in the world that we could come up with that was not created at a certain point in a certain way by God. Otherwise, if it would not be created by God, it wouldn't even come up in our minds. That means that if we have the power of arguing and rebelling and so on, this is something God created. Of course, we have free will to choose whether to rebel or not, what to do with this God's creation, godly creation. However, if such a thing came up in Korach's mind, it's because God created rebellion. Where did God create rebellion? If you look at the second day of creation, the Torah says that God put the heavens and divided with the heavens the upper waters and the lower waters. And furthermore, when you look at the language the Torah uses to end up each one of the days of creation, the Torah says that God saw that this was good, and then you go to a new day, so to speak. But in the second day, there's no kitov, words. This is good. God didn't see that this was good, actually. Discussions and arguments are not a good thing. That's why God didn't say, this is good, and moved on the next day. However, on the third day, God said, this is good twice. One for the work of the previous day, and one for the work of the third day. That means that even though argument in itself, rebellion in itself is not a good thing, that's why God didn't say this is good. However, there's a shape, there's a way that we can actually refine this argument and come up with a good thing out of the argument. That's the piece that comes after the argument. So you have two people. One says yes, one says no. They're arguing and they go up to a higher level. That means they go to a third person and they put this third person on top of them, and that person helps them make peace between these two opposites. Therefore, we must say that Korach took, so to speak, the bad aspect of argument, but there's a good aspect to it also, the piece that comes afterwards. How do we see all of this in the story? And the idea is like this. Korach was against the type of leadership that Aaron embodied, actually. Not against leadership, as we explained before. He wanted to be a leader himself, but he was against a very specific aspect of leadership that Aaron embodied. What was the leadership of Aaron? the type of leadership that he actually connected people, even opposite things, opposite teams, so to speak. Aaron made peace with them. As our sages explain, that Aaron was a person that loved peace. He pursued peace in many aspects of life. If there was a commercial problem, he went to one guy, to the other guy, and said, yeah, he wants to make peace. Come on, let's go. To the husband, to the wife, they were arguing, they were fighting. So he made peace between them. That's why people actually, when Aaron passed away, they cried. The whole Jewish people, that's what the Torah says, cried Aaron. When Moshe passed away, only men cried Aaron. The women were not crying. Why were the women crying also when Aaron passed away? Because he made peace between the man and his wife. Korach was against that type of leadership. He thought leadership has to be something like in the second day of creation, higher, lower. There have to be leaders, there have to be people, and they have to be disconnected. And Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, Cohen, and so on, they embodied exactly the opposite. Yes, there has to be leadership. There has to be higher people, lower people. Some people know more. Some people know less. Somebody has to guide. If everybody is a leader and everybody guides, it's impossible. This one says, God, let's go this way, let's go the other way. We need a leader. Yeah, okay. But the leader has to be connected to the people. And the leader, what does that mean in practical terms? Leader has to understand, has to feel what the people actually need, has to be conscious of his people that he's leading. And then he can be the good leader that the Torah talks about. Korach also wanted to be a leader, but in a very bad way. A type of leadership that is completely disconnected from the reality of the people, from what they need. And that's why we see that after the rebellion of Korach, the Torah says that we have to give, it used to be, nowadays we don't do this for many reasons, but we had to give certain gifts to the Kohen, of the crop, of the wool and other things. Why does the Torah fix, quote unquote, the rebellion of Korach by explaining these gifts that the people had to give to the leader, to the Kohen? Because that formed actually a connection between the people and the leader. People went to the leader, they talked to him, they spoke with him, and they learned from him and so on. And the leader received something and gave something else, his knowledge, his peace, so to speak. That's why the Torah fixes Korach's rebellion with this reunion, so to speak, of leadership with the people. If you want to be a good leader, and you want to be a leader according to the laws and the ideas and the teachings, the lessons of the Torah, you have to be conscious of whom you're leading, and you have to be taking care of what actually they need, not so much about what you need.